Well, it won't have an impact on hardcore supporters. This is the nature of politics, really, that no matter how low you think an approval rating can get, there are some people who will always support, you know, the top of their ticket. It gets kind of tribal that way. And so it won't have a tangible effect there, I don't think. But I think in a larger sense, this does have a huge effect because it shifts the paradigm, or at least the burden of the question. Meaning, in the past, even if a single player skipped a White House visit, the burden was on them to answer the question, why did you decide not to go to the White House? This is a tradition with American sports champions. The White House invites you, you go. And so if you skipped, you were making a political statement potentially, and the press and fans were interested in that. If the entire team boycotts the White House here and decides not to go, you know, look, there have been a lot of unusual things that have gone on with this administration that many would argue puts it outside the realm of kind of politics as usual in this country. And that would be reflected in an entire team saying, we're not going to this White House. And the question then becomes, and I think it might get to this point, that the burden of the question will no longer be on those that skip the White House. But maybe if you go, or if a team decides to go, the question will be, why are you going? Or why aren't you skipping? And even if that is not the case, at the very least, going to the White House, henceforth with this administration, will be seen as much of a political statement as not going. And that also has never been the case up till now.
Well, my response to the question at hand is simply this. It's ironic that the Golden State Warriors, their credo is, you know, strength in numbers. Because I think that if there was ever a time where strength in numbers would be applicable, it would be here. We've had individual players, the James Harrisons of the world, to the Tom Bradys of the world, elect not to go to the White House to celebrate a Super Bowl championship. That's not foreign territory for us. But when you have an entire team that appears to be willing to take that stance, the coach and numerous, if not all players, then Max is absolutely right. It speaks not just to the players themselves and what they stand for. It speaks to an issue that's been percolating for quite some time from the campaign, and obviously has now gotten to a point where, you know, it's a heightened level of awareness. We have to pay attention to that. It puts the onus and shifts the onus, rather, from the players themselves to the White House, to the president. You've got to answer questions as to why people feel the way that you feel. When you say "Make America Great Again," that was his adage. That's what he was campaigning on. Okay, you know, what do you mean by that? Because there's a bevy, you know, there's a plethora of individuals in our population in various communities who don't feel that this administration is very inclusionary. We're not going to get into all of that because I'm not adept enough to get too in-depth about it, and I don't feel like doing that anyway. But I will say that when you have these players, the Draymond Greens, the Iguodala's of the world, the Steph Curry's of the world, to the Steve Kerr's of the world, to the Greg Popovich's of the world, to Adam Silver in the NBA and some of the statements that they've made along with others, it puts a lot of the onus back on the administration, but it also is going to put some of the onus on the leagues. For example, we've heard Adam Silver speak. We haven't heard too much from Roger Goodell in the National Football League. This is the same league that didn't want Donald Trump as an owner, okay, when he wanted to purchase the Buffalo Bills. You know, you kept him out. And as I reported on several occasions in the past, Max, if you recall, if Donald Trump had been successful in his quest to acquire an NFL team, he may very well have never run for the presidency of the United States of America. So it's interesting how the NFL indirectly actually served a role in pushing him forward to run for the presidency. In the end, when it comes down to, again, it's about strength in numbers, because if the Golden State Warriors elect to make this decision, then to me, the onus shifts from the players having to answer as to why, and it goes to the White House really needing to look at themselves.
I want to make something very clear, by the way, Stephen A. Lest people feel this is a partisan issue, that it's Republican, Democrat. It's not. Look, this has never happened before, not in my lifetime anyway. And one of the interesting, 538 had an interesting piece recently about how the interesting thing about the 2016 election is its normalcy. It's that it broke down along tribal partisan lines, much more closely than people realize. It had a lot in common with previous elections in modern history, including the one that preceded it, in that way. And so Trump was elected. But what's happened since then, even you could argue during the campaign, but certainly since then it's been reinforced. And we don't need to get too deep in the weeds, Russian meddling and all these kind of things. Yeah. But it's that there's a sense among most, the disapproval rating is very high, the approval very low, that what is happening right now is outside of the norms of American politics. And so this response by teams is their way of saying, wait a minute, this is not just partisan, I do or don't agree with President Obama or Reagan or Clinton or Bush. That's not what this is about. This is about us saying, wait, this is not partisan. What we're seeing here is outside of the norms of American politics and tradition, and therefore our response, which is to completely boycott the White House, is also outside of the norm of our traditions.
Stephen A., I have a question for both of you based on that, though. If it's outside of the norm, and they've been outspoken, very Steve Kerr, Curry, on their discuss with our president, so why aren't they coming out and saying we're not going to attend? Why are they saying they haven't made a decision? Like, what's the point of that?
Because they just won the championship. They're preoccupied with celebrations. This is weeks or months down the line. There's no reason to rain on their parade, no pun intended, at this particular moment in time because they're on a high. And talking about this administration and talking about some of the things that we've been witnessing, that we've been seeing, that has made a bevy of Americans and folks, you know, the world over, very, very uncomfortable with what they're witnessing, is not something that they want to address, and they're perfectly entitled to delay being directly focused on that.